Hello, my name is Jerry Phillips. I have a new channel. It's called Facing Facts with Faith. I was going to do a response video to Karen Hyatt's excommunication video. I've been following the polygamy skeptics or polygamy deniers, monogamy affirmers, whatever you want to call it, for some time now, as well as reading many books about a very uncomfortable topic, Joseph Smith's polygamy, or the beginnings of plural marriage within the LDS Church. And I share some of the concerns with the polygamy skeptics. I certainly have a loathing for polygamy. It doesn't make any sense to me. It seems very unfair. It seems I just can't imagine taking the most sacred relationship that I have and destroying it, really, by introducing someone else into a relationship. It would certainly destroy the wonderful relationship I have with my wife. That being said, I have been trying to be faithful to the historical record, and with all of my research into the arguments of the polygamy skeptics, as well as the research into the scholarly articles and books, I have to side with the scholars. The research is just not on the side of the skeptics, even though they do have a leg to stand on. There are certain things that makes you wonder. Nauvoo era polygamy was very, very difficult to find because it was so very secretive and clandestine. And so we have very little evidence of it. But we do have later testimonials. We have coded journal entries. We have affidavits. We have Section 132, which has an extremely strong provenance. But mainly what I wanted to talk about as far as Karen Hyatt's situation, she was excommunicated. And I don't know if this video will go anywhere. It probably will just go out to the ether and no one will ever see it. I guess I'm very troubled. Sorrow is one of the feelings I have for her excommunication, as I would for anyone that was excommunicated. But in some regards, I think it's kind of about time. And I'll tell you why. As members of the church, we can believe anything we want to believe when it comes to our personal beliefs. You know, we don't have to be perfectly aligned with the church's teachings. We may have some ideas that aren't doctrinal, that may be just our own assumptions or our own extrapolating or interpolating. But when we go to teach those publicly, and especially if they conflict with the church's teachings, well, then that's grounds for excommunication. And basically, the argument of the skeptics goes, Joseph Smith didn't introduce polygamy. It was all Brigham Young and those that followed them. Which then brings up the question, well, where does Section 132 come from? Well, they would say that it was a fabrication, that it was pulled out of Brigham Young's drawer in 1852, and and he made up this story about it being dictated to William Clayton at the request of Hiram. Then it was copied by Joseph C. Kingsbury at the request of Newell K. Whitney. Hiram took it to Emma. Emma either destroyed it or required Joseph Smith to destroy it. Then it was read at the Nauvoo Council. They made up all this stuff, and of course they have to say, well, the journal entries which are pretty detailed. William Clayton was a pretty good journal keeper, and so was Wilford Woodruff and Willard Richards and a few others. But you have to say, well, that Brigham Young had him fabricate that. They had him fabricate his journal. And again, the conspiracy just goes so deep, and it makes you wonder, well, why did they come up with this elaborate story? If William Clayton was supposedly the scribe for Joseph Smith's revelation, and William Clayton was alive in 1852, why didn't Brigham Young just have William Clayton write out the revelation? Anyways, my concern is I'm trying to do my best to help those that are convinced by the polygamy skeptics or the monogamy affirmers. I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm trying, and that's why I call my channel Facing Facts with Faith. I'm afraid that there's a lot of people within the church who have been faced with a new narrative that doesn't match our traditional narrative in some regards, whether it be the translation of the Book of Mormon. Some people are hearing for the first time about Joseph Smith's polygamy, and it's very disturbing for them, especially in light of all the scandals lately with Warren Jeffs and his clan. And they're equating anything with our church with that church, and I don't think that's a fair comparison. But my intent is to hopefully, maybe I can't get through to the polygamy skeptics, and the evidence I've seen so far, as far as my interactions with them, is convincing me that it's not going to go anywhere. But I'm trying to reach those that are kind of fence sitters, that haven't decided where they fall, to that the LDS historians that are members of the church, because there are LDS historians that aren't members of the church, but the LDS historians that are members of the church are, and I say historians, I'm scholarly, PhDs, accredited. They use rigorous standards and adhere to rigorous standards when it comes to history. And I'm sure they would have been tickled to discover through their research that, for example, the Book of Mormon's narrative, that it was largely translated through the use of the Nephite interpreters, that would have been wonderful had that matched the historical record. And it would have matched the traditional narrative that we've been taught. But the evidence points in the other direction, that Joseph Smith largely used the seer stone. And what my intent with polygamy, with the seer stone, with many other aspects that we are trying to be more faithful to in terms of the actual events, that we can face those facts, we can face those sources, we can face the evidence, and we don't have to jettison our faith, that we can retain our faith through all of that. And that's the purpose of this channel. But going back to Karen Hyatt, I did reach out to her, and she was very kind in the email that I sent out. I wanted to talk to her, and she said she'd be happy to talk to me. And I haven't taken her up on that yet. I still would like to do that. She's still committed to her channel and to continuing to publish her thoughts and her beliefs. My understanding is she was the producer, video editor of Michelle Stone's work. Michelle has not been excommunicated, but she has stopped publicly teaching what she was teaching before, and has chosen that route, which is, I'm glad she has. I'm sure she still holds her same beliefs, but anyways, with regard to Karen Hyatt, I do wish, when she talks about historians and how their work is shoddy, I'm trying to determine by what methods or by what criteria is she making that claim. I found them to be very, very faithful to the historical method and to historical rigor. There was a case in Britain where, I'm trying to remember the case, but it was essentially Irvin versus Penguin Books. David Irvine sued Deborah Lidstadt for basically calling him a pseudo-historian and a Holocaust denier. And so it was litigated by, or it was presided by Justice Charles Gray. And in the end, he basically They lost their case, or he lost his case. Justice Gray had to determine whether his historical methods were objective and reasonable. And here's a summary of the criteria that he used. She must treat sources with appropriate reservations. She must not dismiss counter evidence without scholarly consideration. She must be even-handed in her treatment of evidence and eschew cherry-picking. She must clearly indicate any speculation. She must not mistranslate documents or mislead by omitting parts of documents. She must weigh the authenticity of all accounts, not merely those that contradict her favored world view, and she must take the motives of historical actors into consideration. I believe a good historian does all those. For example, when it comes to the Searstone narrative, when you've got sources that have no motivation to lie, that agree with sources that may have a motivation to lie, well, you just have to report what the findings show. And the findings, when it comes to the Searstone, is that Joseph Smith used it. Martin Harris said he used it. Emma said he used it. David Harris, said he used it. David Whitmer. David Whitmer said he used it. And there was one of the publishers, one of the printers that they went to, that Joseph went and tried to contract with, said he used it. And so when you have all these sources that are agreeing, eventually you just have to report what the historical data most strongly shows, regardless of your beliefs. So when it comes to the skeptics, I've just found that the things that they don't want to talk about that are very hard to dismiss, like for example Section 132 and all the evidence surrounding that revelation, that it was dictated by Joseph Smith to William Clayton at the request of Hiram, so Hiram could take the revelation to Emma and convince her of the truthfulness of the doctrine. That it was then copied by Joseph C. Kingsbury at the request of Newell K. Whitney. Then Hiram Smith entered the red brick store wanting the original. Joseph Kingsbury was not done, so he hurried, and it's clearly shown in the document itself that the signs of him rushing to finish his copy. It was the Newell K. Whitney and Joseph C. Kingsbury read each document to make sure that it was a faithful copy. It was given to the original was given to Hiram. He took it to Emma. Emma did not respond well to it. Joseph and Emma had an argument over it. Either he destroyed it at her request or she destroyed it. Again, this is all evidenced by the sources, by the extant journal entries, other sources. Newell K. Whitney, it was read to the High Council. Anyone that was in the High Council that left a record said that revelation was read in the High Council on August 12th, 1843. No one in that High Council, including those that were ardent opponents of polygamy, no one in that council said that it wasn't read. Anyone that left a record said that was read. Even William Marks. And William Marks was one of Emma's best buddies, I guess, and also went with the RLDS Church. And in a meeting on May 2nd, 1865, in an RLDS leadership meeting, he admitted that there was a revelation read on plural marriage by Hiram to the High Council. He saw that the other members of the High Council received it. He disagreed with it. He also said on 4 different occasions that Joseph had come to him after, I guess it's either after the Nauvoo Expositor, and told him that he regretted the plural marriage, that he wanted to stamp it out. But all this indicates, this is William Marks, who eventually, was kind of silenced by Joseph Smith III, I think. Joseph Smith III was emphatic about his belief that his father never practiced or taught plural marriage. And by the way, he opened up his, when he was first called to that position, one of his tenets was basically, my father was a good man. Good men aren't polygamists. Therefore, my father wasn't a polygamist. And that's, I think, what the skeptics of the position they've taken. Polygamy is evil. It's always been evil. It's never been sanctioned. Therefore, Joseph Smith wasn't a polygamist. Somehow they're okay with Brigham Young being one. I guess I can't argue that. But Nauvoo-era polygamy was extremely secretive. It was clandestine. For obvious reasons, it was against the laws of Illinois. Many argue that Joseph Smith was practicing moral consequentialism, basically, that he figured it was better to deny. If you want to say lie, fine, use that word. If you want to say carefully pick his words, that's fine too, about plural marriage, because it was extremely secret. And my feeling, no, Joseph Smith didn't foresee his death, at least not in the months before his actual martyrdom. I feel like he was putting it into place, was planning on the saints moving out of the United States, where he could practice it openly. There's a lot of uncomfortable topics when it comes to plural marriage. I don't like the topics. It's secretive. You're keeping things from your first wife, which is insane, but it's the reality. That's what happened. It's what Joseph did. It's what he allegedly asked others to do. I don't know whether that was just basically because they wouldn't accept it, or he figured the less people that knew, the better. Anyways, so this channel exists to hopefully help those. I have a testimony of the gospel. It's born of the Spirit. I have a testimony of Joseph Smith. It's born of the Spirit. But I live with these tension that these seemingly contradictions cause, and that's okay. I live with it. I know on the one hand that it's true due to the unmistakable divine manifestation that I've had in my life, but I also recognize that I do not know all things, that I will at one day understand more. Probably not in this life. I'd like to, but we can navigate this. We don't have to jettison our faith, but we do have to be flexible. We have to be pliable. We have to figure out how to incorporate it, how to incorporate this into our faith. We all hold certain beliefs, and if you just simply ardently are going to just stand firm that polygamy is always evil, that it's never been sanctioned, you're going to have a hard time. If you can be flexible in your faith, and you can learn how to incorporate new information that doesn't quite match the old, it doesn't mean that that anyone held things back. It doesn't mean that people are being nefarious. It just means that folklore and faithful retellings change over time, and we tend to the church wanted to move away from some of the more folklorish, folk magic aspects of our beginnings, and oral stories that get passed down tend to be corrupted. So I really like what the church is doing in publishing the Joseph Smith papers. Eventually we're going to have the William Clayton papers. We're going to have the Wilford Woodruff papers. I love what they're doing. They try to be as transparent as possible. I agree 100% that sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. Anyways, I hope that you'll come back if you have tuned in. If this just goes out of the ether and no one sees it, fine. But I'd like to talk about this further. I'd love to hear your comments. Please comment below about your position on this. I'd love to talk to you about that. I do get sometimes passionate about my position, but I do consider it. Sometimes my wife knows me. I'll sometimes consider what someone else has said. I'll come back and say, I've thought about it. You do have a point, but I will. I like rigorous discussion. So please leave a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.